Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Laurel Copeland. Just a little bit about me. I currently teach early childhood special ed at Sycamore School District in our Little Spartans early learning program. So I have taught in a blended model and also a self-contained model. Most recently, more of a self-contained model because of our COVID restrictions and a lack of staffing and things like that. So this past year, I also taught remotely in person. I think my caseload changed maybe 4 times. So it's been a year. Prior to that, I taught preschool for all at Hiawatha. And then before that, I worked at the Child Development Lab at NIU. So a little bit of my background. So next we have Michelle.
Hello, I'm Michelle Garter-Lewis, and I'm representing District 33 in West Chicago. I've been teaching kindergarten there for 13 years now, so lots of experience. That's my little planet. Go Cougars! And next we have Emily.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Emily Reilly. I'm the Assistant Project Director for StarNet Regions 1 and 3. And StarNet provides training and technical assistance to early childhood professionals with an emphasis on supporting students with disabilities and individual education plans. And so we have a training calendar. I see a few familiar names. I think I've seen it some trainings at StarNet, so nice to see people. And prior to that, I directed the NIU Child Development Lab and spent 6 years as a preschool master teacher in a emergent curriculum play-based learning environment.
Let's go with Sandra next. You're on my screen next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Sandra Ehrat, and I am a kids coach under the ISB Kids Project. And prior to that, I was a kindergarten teacher, one that has obviously passion for me, which I am still excited to be part of that whole kindergarten world after leaving the classroom. So thank you for having us today, DeKalb County ROE. This was a wonderful event, and I'm going to pass it to Laurel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laurel Mateyka. I am the administrator in the Zoom. So I'm currently a principal at PH Miller Elementary School in Plano, Illinois. Before that, I was a high school math teacher and assistant principal also in Plano. And before that, I was a stay-at-home mom where I got my best training for early childhood teaching and learning. So I'm here to tell you how to get your administrators on board. So thank you, Samantha, for having me and letting me be part of the conversation.
Thank you all so much. So we're going to get right in. Again, if you want to submit a question for our panelists, please put that in the chat and we will get to that. But we're going to start with our first question, and I'm going to direct it to Emily first, and then if anyone else wants to chime in on our panel, feel free to. But if Emily, if you would talk to this thought. I've thought about incorporating play-based learning in instruction. What are the first steps to accomplish this?
Okay, well, that's definitely an excellent question, and one that there's, I think, a lot of components to consider, but I'm going to try to highlight the most critical and the first step piece. But I think many of you are addressing the first step now by attending this session, this conference, and being knowledgeable about play, because you have to know your why. It's so important to know your why as a teacher and an educator. And so I would just continue, you know, to learn more and more about play as much as you can. I also think the important piece before thinking about the play is like the what of your teaching. So always being kind of familiar with, you know, what are those age appropriate expectations? What are those curriculum expectations? And then thinking about your environment and really taking a close look at the environment, how it's currently set up. do you have any opportunities right now for play? How can you adapt your environment and set up a rich, engaging classroom where children have choices? There's interesting, engaging materials, open-ended materials for children to explore. Part of your environment is also considering your daily schedule. So when are those opportunities available to provide plenty of rich play, free play with that choice, where children are really driving the curriculum. Like you kind of have that expertise in the what of the teaching and, the context, the being intentional. But the children really, I always said when I was directing, like the children will give you the curriculum if you just listen close enough. If you kind of watch and listen and observe, they're like planning your curriculum, but you have to really key into that. So I think part of this initial steps with play-based learning is evaluating and think about your role. Like what kind of teacher are you now? What kind of strategies are you using, and developing a bit of a process for yourself to really observe children and kind of what their interests are, so that you can change the environment. Because I think so much of the play-based learning is teachers tuning into those interests, current skills and abilities of children, and adapting the environment to support play. So I kind of like to lean on the observe, reflect, respond process. You're constantly observing in and out of the moment, reflecting on what that means. Some of that is linking it back to your standards or your curriculum, and then responding, scaffolding, coming up with an appropriate response to the children. Just taking a quick look at my notes. I think those are really, the main kind of big pieces I wanted to hit on. But again, I think there's lots of things to consider with play, but I'll leave it there and let anybody else kind of hop in if they wanted to ask a question or elaborate on some of those statements.
I'd like to piggyback if I may. Hi, Michelle again, kindergarten teacher. I've seen a lot of kindergarten teachers come and go in my building, and a lot of them will ask, so you do play-based? Oh my gosh, so overwhelming. They might not have any experience with play-based and might be scared to do it. So I would say if you're a teacher who has never tried play-based learning, and maybe even your administrator isn't on board yet, but you want to just try like one thing, I would say, like everybody has centers, and you could grab something that you have in your centers already, something open-ended, which would be something like Unifix cubes, anything that you have, and add one component to that, maybe like peg dolls, or just something else that could make it just a little different or interesting, and just put it there. Look at your kids measures. Like if you are using kids or DRDP, you have math objectives, like persistence and learning just things, any objective that you want to observe. Take that open-ended material and see what the kids do with it. Like, what do you have to lose? It's one center, it's one open-ended thing. Even if you see students like just putting them together and then throwing them across the room, well, you already know that in one measure, they're going to be, in the early stages of it, you're going to observe something. And if you insert yourself in there and say something like, what would happen if you turned this into, I don't know, a house for this little peg doll, what would happen? You're going to see something. So I would say, like, if you're scared and you just want to try one thing, take something that you already have and just invite them to do anything they want.
Thank you. I'm going to direct the next question to Laurel Copeland. And in early education settings, how can play be used in a purposeful manner to encourage child development?
Okay, so first of all, you guys are going to figure out quickly that Emily Reilly was one of my first mentors and continues to be, because I'm going to sound like her parrot in my answers here. But I would say the most important thing for me in this question is that all play is purposeful, right? So kids do it naturally, no matter what developmental level they're at, they are naturally going to explore their world and play. So I think for me as a teacher, something that I continually have to do is teach my community, teach my administration, teach my school board what purposeful play is, what it looks like, and the benefits of it. So I think anytime I have the opportunity to invite someone into our classroom, I will do it. And I will make sure they're down at the table, you know, playing with us so that they get the benefits of it as well. But I think for purposeful play in the classroom, you really have to think about your role as the teacher. So I really have to remember that I am the play facilitator, and that this is our community, our classroom is a community, and that I have to remember to trust the students that I have in my classroom, and like Emily said, follow their lead. So I think when you're setting up play in your classroom, or you're setting up your environment, again, mirroring what Emily said, but setting that intention for the play. So what is the intention of what I'm doing? Is it self-directed? Is it collaborative? Is it sensory-based? Is it you know, guided play, facilitated play? So thinking about the intention, observing what the students are doing, and then reflecting on that. That's how I feel like that reflection piece is something that we forget, but that is how I watch my students learn and grow. Particularly, you know, this past year when I have been teaching students who have identified developmental delays, and not all of them come in with age-appropriate play skills. Some of those students have to be directly taught how to play or how to move on to the next developmental level of play. So observing what they are doing, you know, meeting them where they're at through their play, and then scaffolding that learning to support their IEP goal. But again, I think the environment is also what helps drive that play, having that extended time. I think that's something that I have to be thoughtful about, because you start to just kind of fall into that rhythm in the classroom of, we have to do this, now we have to do this, now the physical therapist is coming in, okay, now we have the speech path coming in, you know, and you forget that that extended block of time is so important to facilitate that play. And so, and having materials out that children can revisit. I think we start to feel like our worth as a teacher is based on how many new things we can put into the classroom, and now we have to switch dramatic play, and it's going to be this big amazing, you know, coffee shop, and doesn't this look great, but it's not meeting the needs of the student, because they're not able to revisit just basic foundational play schemes over and over and over again. So I mean, check my notes, that I think making sure that the play is always meaningful. So understanding your classroom, the culture within your classroom, and listening and trusting your students, I think, is the most important part of making that play purposeful.
To piggyback real quick off of that, Laurel, that was excellent. I love how you brought in that reflection piece, which is something that is typically missed when it comes to this part of our day. But also just to say that, remember that when we say purposeful for the kids, that it is child directed. So if the materials that they're playing with, or that you are bringing into the classroom to see what skills and behaviors they know, is not something they're interested in, then you're not going to be able to see their full potential.
Thank you for that addition, Sandra. Now, I think the $1 million question that all of our educators want to know, and we're going to direct this to Laurel Mateyka, is what are some ways advocates of play can influence administrators and families to accept play-based teaching and learning? And feel free to share any successes you've had, any of our other panelists.
Okay, well, so I think it's a lot, but here's the most important thing that I think all teachers, but especially those of you who are kindergarten teachers and early childhood educators, need to remember. You are the experts, okay? So you need to remember that, because having come from the high school level, there is a real tendency to point fingers at kinder and early grades and what they haven't done to prepare the kids, and that it's all just play and fun and games. And so I am here to tell you and affirm that that is not true. Okay, so you all knew it wasn't true. However, you need to really believe it and have confidence in yourself and what you know is best for kids and start advocating for that. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy because every principal is not going to be like me, but I will tell you how to speak the language that might help your cause a little bit more. The first thing that I really think you need to know and share with everyone, parents, administrators, each other, check each other, is to go back to best practices and what is developmentally appropriate, because the state expectations, the national expectations may have changed for what we should be doing at kindergarten, but the thing that hasn't changed is the 5-year-old brain. Okay, so what worked back in the day is still what's best for kids. So you have that in your corner no matter what. Nobody can argue with that. So kids still learn best through play. And so that's what you need to always be going back to and inserting into every conversation, and why you're using these methods. The other thing that you have to be careful of is that play is an instructional method. It is not a time of day. It is not a thing we do. It is a method that you use to teach students, right? So, and I'm giving you the words that you need to use when you're talking to administrators, okay? Because administrators don't want to hear about play. They want to hear about research. They want to hear about what's going to get results and the instructional methods that you're using. So play is the method that you're using. I would also encourage a shift away from the word play, because our society and especially education has perverted that word so much. This is on a recording. I swear I'll never work outside of Plano again. So we've perverted the word so that we now can't use it effectively to make our case, right? So I think that you will get further, especially depending on your administrator's background, by mixing that word or shifting completely to inquiry, right? So play is inquiry-based learning. I came from the high school. We were lobbying hard for inquiry as best practice for high schoolers. Okay, so now we're using inquiry for 5-year-olds and younger, and really it is the best method for all learning. So when you start to train families, communities, administrators to understand that, yes, we're talking about play, but what it really is inquiry-based learning, that is a term that is more acceptable, I feel, to a wider audience. So I think you need to think about that. Now, what I will say is another way that you can get to make your case, and I don't know if it's a teacher's role, but it certainly is a question you could ask or something you can pay attention to. What does the behavior data look like in your school? Okay, because I will tell you, if the behavior data looks like kids are struggling and not being successful in a traditional classroom where they're expected to act like not a 5-year-old, okay, part of the reason might be because we are not doing what is developmentally appropriate for them. And so you need to retrain the mindset, but sometimes that kind of data, because people are highly motivated to improve student behavior. So if a way to improve student behavior, especially among our youngest learners, is to use developmentally appropriate instructional practices and methods, AKA play, then that might be a pathway in to trying it. Well, maybe I can pilot this and you can compare my data to so-and-so's who's not ready to try play, right? So some of those are some things that might help you start the conversation. And then, of course, we know the results will follow because we know that kids love this and they respond well to it. And then the beauty that you do have is the kids rubric, which is state mandated. So let's not forget to remind our administrators that we have to do this because this assessment is mandated by the state. It's required. So we don't really know how we can collect all of this data unless, right? So, you know, that's what I would say. I mean, I could literally take up this entire panel with coaching you all on how to have this conversation. But, you know, I'll start there and see what kind of questions you guys have or if there's more.
Laurel, I want to add to that because another great thing for administrators is they need to see it in action, to be honest. Once they see it, they understand it. So I highly encourage, Laurel, Michelle, I'm sorry, but I highly encourage you to contact them, visit their schools. They are really champions of play and are doing a great job.
Yeah, you know, and the other thing that we've done that you can do as kindergarten teachers, and I know everybody's kind of all across the board, but I'm assuming if you're in this panel, you know, if this session and you've been attending, you're really highly motivated to move this forward for your school or at least your classroom. I think it is a really good idea. We are doing the kids assessment more than the required once a year. And the reason is because we want to see the improvement. We want our teachers to get skilled at observational assessment and collecting that data. And really, if you only do it once a year in the fall, there's no, I mean, it's very hard to commit to that. So if you would go to your administrators, to your team and say, hey, we'd really like to do this 3 times a year so we can see the growth that our students are making with this method, then I think data always speaks because it's data, right? And administrators understand it. So again, you have to speak in a language they can understand. And so I think that's powerful. And also then if you're doing it 3 times a year, now you need to play all year long and you need to expand and, you know, do all the parts of each of the domains that are required. You know, if you want to get really crazy, maybe your PE teacher takes on the physical domain and does it there too, you know, but have a plan and work with your colleagues at the kinder level so that you guys can sort of strategize how you want to do this. And yeah, certainly come talk. I've said I would talk to principals and I've had principals reach out to me. So, you know, if you want to have them call me, certainly it's not my place to tell them what to do, but I'm happy to tell them what we're doing and how well it's working for us. So
Laurel, I love what you said about the brain development piece as well. I think that teaching your administration as much as you can about what child development looks like is a really important piece as well. Christy Mraz just sort of touched on this a little bit too, but I think when we have infants and toddlers, we're much gentler with following that continuum of development. So someone, once said to me, like, we don't push a kid down the stairs when we want them to walk, right? We wait until they're ready and we scaffold them and we help them and we model for them. But we have we're in this society now where we've forgotten that academic piece and learning your letters and learning how to read and how to write, that is still developmental. And just because they think that they should be ready to do that doesn't mean that they are, because they need all of that experience. Lisa Murphy, who I love, has said in one of her books, in order to have it in the head, you need it in the hand. And I think that has been something that has stuck with me. If we want children to learn those new skills, those academic readiness skills, we have to give them that hands-on exploration first.
Yeah. And you know what? The other thing I was thinking is, here's another great thing about the kids rubric. Couple things. It literally gives you the learning progression. So where they start to where they are going, right? Just for that 1 year. If you are lucky enough to be collaborating with a preschool program that uses Teaching Strategies Gold. You can look at that from birth to third grade, which is early childhood education, which let's not forget to remind all of our administrators that early childhood does not end at preschool kinder. It's third grade. So that is a span of time, right? Okay, so looking at that progression is very instructive to teachers to know that progression. So the other thing that the kids rubric does, and I see great power in this when our teachers, our kinder teachers, bring student concerns to our multidisciplinary team, right? Because they're still part of that process. What they come with, because we're doing kids 3 times a year and we're doing play, they come knowing what kids can do. And that completely shifts the conversation. Because if you say, well, they can't this, they can't this, they can't this. Okay, well, there's a lot of things underneath what they cannot do, but it's so much more effective when a teacher comes saying, well, my students can do this, this, and this. And you have people on that multidisciplinary team, like a school psychologist who's like, oh, well, gosh, you know, they're functioning at a 36-month level. They're 2 years delayed. We don't need to try RTI for 2 6-week cycles and then decide to evaluate them because you're telling me what you see they can do, we should move to an evaluation right away. What? Oh my gosh, just because we're observing kids and we know what they can do, now we can actually meet their needs more effectively as a school? Well, that's amazing. So like, why wouldn't you want to know what your kids could do rather than everything they cannot do? And so I think that that is the beauty of using that rubric ongoing all the time, because you get better trained at meeting kids where they are, really. And that's the name of the game, for all ages, And then, okay, the last thing I'm gonna say, well, for right now, is you need to work with someone, if it's not you, someone who can help you make the connection to what you are doing through play to what it looks like in the upper grades, okay? Because here's just a quick, simple nugget, and I am a high school administrator first, right? So when I look at dramatic play and role playing, all right, and any of that, I am looking at the foundation for all writing at the secondary level. Okay, so like that's how my brain connects the two. And so if we skip a step, like kids have to practice oral storytelling, listening to stories, creating scenarios, and interacting with each other in order to build the background knowledge to put that on paper. So that whole creative process needs to happen in a way that makes sense for them at their age, that everyone can do. And so that's how I see the importance of play, is if we skip that step, it's going to be a struggle to get them to be effective creative writers and storytellers as they go through the grades. That simple. It's literally that simple. And you can do that for every content area. You know, you can. So you need to do that.
Perfect. I'm going to skip the next question, panelists, so don't get alarmed. But we're going to go right into, how do you know students are meeting the standards when you use play-based strategies? And I'm going to give it to Michelle first and then have Sandra kind of expound on it from her kids regional coach perspective.
So even though the kids see it as just play, right? They're like, we're going to play. You are going to be intentional about which materials you're setting out. You're not, you know, okay. So I will be honest, when we started play, I had it all, right? Like the dollhouse, the puppet, everything was out all at once. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to see. But now that I've had some experience, I know, you know, for a while, for me, the dollhouse was not showing me, as I was not getting the bang for my buck with the dollhouse. So I took it away and I put different kinds of materials that were appropriate for my class. So, you know, take any DRDP or kids measure that you want to observe, something that you are not really getting a chance to observe, especially if you're a teacher who has never tried play-based learning, right? You are like, I don't know what to do for sociodramatic play. Like, I can't observe it. My administrator told me to observe it during recess. That doesn't work, you know, you've heard that. So you're going to set out materials that are going to facilitate the observation of that. And maybe you don't know what that is at first, and you're going to try a couple of things and you're going to be like, they're not doing anything. Well, they are doing something, okay? And you're going to give them time to use those materials and you're going to get something out of it. But so like, say for example, you want to put out popsicle sticks and something that connects the popsicle stick so they can build something. What can you observe with that? Persistence. They need to plan. They need to see if their plan's going to work. You are seeing self-regulation, because when that little structure falls on them and, you know, they start crying, you know where they are on that rubric, you know, or if they don't and they go back to their plan, they're like, you know what, I need to make the foundation stronger. Then you're like, wow, there's so many different, you're going to find that you're going to plan for one measure and you're going to observe 5 measures. One thing I will say is that if you are setting up materials, you want to stray away from materials that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Like I don't set up materials that are like, solve this problem and show me your work when you're done, because that only has one solution. And if they can't do it the way that it says there, then all it's showing you is that they couldn't do it that one way. So all the materials that I set up are open-ended materials, and you have those things in your classroom already. Or if your kids all summer are eating popsicles, save those popsicle sticks, because those are magic. They can do a million things. Even if the only thing that you set up in your classroom is something like a maker space. And I don't like to use the word only for makerspace, because it is one of my favorite things. Like, do not be afraid of makerspace. Glue is not going to ruin your life. You can figure out a way to make makerspace not scary for you, because of all the things that it is going to show you, all the abilities that it is going to show you. My students in makerspace, and makerspace, for those of you who are not familiar, is just a space that has a lot of different like recyclables. Like, who doesn't use toilet paper, paper towels, you know, twist ties from your bread? Well, you know, you don't have to go out and buy anything. Just save literally all recyclables and set them out for your students with some tape. Tape is your best friend. When you spend all your money this summer, it needs to be on tape. Masking tape, scotch tape, because if you can provide those very cheap materials that you were already going to buy anyway, you are going to observe a million things. Literacy. I had a student last year it was not last year, it was 2 years ago, make a hoverboard for Pigeon to ride. I was like mind blown. And she wrote a little sign saying, please do not touch, this is Pigeon's hoverboard. So this student showed me writing. She planned to build a hoverboard and she built it, and it worked. And it was connected to literacy because we had read about don't let the pigeon drive the bus. I mean, all the things that I observed, and just by putting out rolls of toilet paper and tape. So I would say you're just starting, look at one measure, set something out that you think is gonna let you observe that. And then just give it a try. Like, don't be scared. What's the worst that can happen? How many centers have you put, and I hate the word centers, but I'm just gonna use it. How many centers have you put out that sucked, where you were like, why did I have that? So you might as well just try something new, right? Just set out something open-ended and try it. And you're not gonna be sorry, I promise. Just give it time.
Michelle, you were just, everything you were saying, I was like, yes, yes, yes. And it goes back to the rest of the panel as well. When you think about how do you know that students are meeting the standards? Well, I go back to that first comment Laurel Copeland made, was it's intentional. So your planning is intentional. And so if you're kind of using that UBD design, and you are thinking about, well, what is my outcome? What do I want the student to know? And then you back that up and you bring things in. And like Michelle said, you bring in materials to meet that need, but then don't be afraid while you're interacting, because of course you are interacting with your students during any kind of play-based instruction, that you're asking those guiding questions, those open-ended questions. You're bringing in other props and other materials to advance that development. And so also just remember that children, especially with the ones that we all work with, and I high five Laurel Mateyka for saying early childhood is birth through the age of 8, right? So when we are working with this age range, child development happens in stages. And we do need to understand those stages, which is something that we might not necessarily have learned in college. I'm sure all of our first year of teaching, we were like, this did not prepare me at all for teaching, right? So we do need some more professional development on that. So don't be afraid to ask for assistance. Ask, because one of your colleagues, that might be their strength. Or even if, for all of you kindergarten teachers, I'm your kids coach, reach out. I am happy to help you with this. When it comes to, I want to just tie in the standards for administrators as well. Don't be afraid to have a little sign in there that says, just like Christy Moraz was saying, show them that while they're in the dramatic play, this is what they're learning. These aren't just Legos. One of my favorite poems is by that anonymous person, which I wish we knew who it was, about play, and that these aren't just blocks, right? I'm going to be an architect. Like, there's so many possibilities. So when we think about meeting the standards, if you know where your students are, you know where you want to get them, and you know the steps you're going to take, you will meet those standards.
Yeah, and if I could just add one last thing to your, I love you. And Laurel needs to go on tour. If you set something out and it didn't work, it's not that those materials were not appropriate. Like, you might just want to throw something extra in there, right? Like, just as you are there to scaffold them, you might just need to scaffold them with one extra item. So like right now during COVID times, they were like, you're not going to be able to play. I was like, excuse me, what? No, we're going to play. So I said, fine, if everybody has to have open-ended, whatever, I want open-ended materials, but everybody has to have their own materials. I was like, okay, everybody gets their own peg doll, and a peg doll is just those little wooden dolls. And I said, this is your peg family. You can do with them whatever you want. That was their material forever. And then that way, Unifix cubes became something their family could live in. When you just set out something like Unifix cubes, they're going to put them together, they're going to take them apart, they're going to put them together, take them apart, maybe not do something with it. But I was like, maybe, or like you throw a little car in there. Suddenly, maybe they want to make a ramp out of those Unifix cubes, or maybe their family's cheering on the car that's going down the ramp. Like, just don't discard what you set out right away just because you didn't see the results that you wanted. You are there to scaffold, and just throw something in there, like if so-and-so loves dinosaurs, suddenly there's a dinosaur in there, and you can say like, it's Jurassic Park, and like I had dominoes in my classroom. They put all of our stuff into storage this summer, and I managed to grab a couple of things, like large wooden dominoes was one of them. Well, those became my blocks. That's all I had for blocks this year. And so I was like, you can make a ramp with blocks. You can build a zoo with those dominoes. Like, just think outside of the box, because you can use anything as play materials. They do not need to buy you a kitchen for you to do this.
Perfect. We do have a question that came in, and so I'm going to move to that one. And I knew this was going to fly by because there's just so much to say about it. So if someone wants to answer this question, I'll just throw it out there for you. But it says, I really want to go into first grade teaching, but I'm at a loss for what to do with play. And I've not seen much play in first grade classrooms that I've observed. How can I use play in a first grade classroom?
Oh my gosh, before any of you answer, and I don't know if any of you have seen this, but there is a bill, and I'm waiting to see how it turns out, but it's HB 5131. Like, if you haven't seen it yet, it's very exciting. I know that it went through the Senate, and it basically is amending the school code to allow 60 minutes of play, and that is unstructured play. I'm not sure, again, we're waiting to see how it falls out, but keep your fingers crossed that, and this is for K through the 8th grade, which is why I'm mentioning it now to go with this first grade question. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm going to answer this because we are moving play up into first grade, and then our hope, we have graded centers. So my building is only preschool, kinder, and first. However, I'm already starting to bring along my colleague at the 2nd and 3rd grade building because we want to, we would love to force him to also incorporate play, for 2nd and 3rd grade, early childhood. So, but I think that it can be done. I think simply, I mean, everyone's doing SEL, right? So under social emotional learning, there's always reason and opportunity to provide a way for kids to interact and practice appropriate social interaction. So if no other way is it possible, it's always possible there. And so I would think to incorporate it there as well. But the one thing when I'm listening to Michelle and putting a little peg doll with those Unifix cubes, I do think it is our responsibility for the good of society to retrain students on how to literally think outside the box, because everything they're doing now, not by fault of them or their parents, it's society. Everything is done for them. They watch a video, it's already predetermined. I like the idea of open-ended materials and not having a beginning, middle, and end, because when you have that, kids are worried about being right or wrong. If we're going to create risk takers and creative problem solvers, we need to eliminate right or wrong and just let it be what it is and trust the process. And so, I mean, you see kids learn in spite of anything until they get to school. It is not until they get to school that they actually hate learning, right? So let's just be honest about that. I think we all know that's true. We just need to admit it and then try to recreate the ways that they are learning at home before they ever get to us, and we ruin it for them by making them have to do it our way. No, so, and I think that goes for first grade too. So knowing your students is always important. That's even in Danielson, right? So again, the administrator, well, you're doing these things for Danielson. This is classroom environment, and domain 2. So that's why you're doing it. Of course, you have to build a relationship with your kids. So you guys better take me up on some of this advice and try it and let me know how it works, because I want to know before I go on tour. And just stuff like that. But, an assessment, well, okay, kids mandated, observational, you've got to do it. But yeah, first grade, I think. And then if anything around literacy just lends itself to play, I feel. So that's the first place to start. And then just as a math teacher, I just want to tell you to make the connection between anything you're doing with sorting or activities like that. I taught Algebra 1. If you don't know how to combine like terms, okay, that's because you weren't sorting enough in the early grades, because you need to be able to distinguish characteristics between the different types of things. So I think you could scaffold that. Oh, the other thing I was going to tell you is engage your social worker to teach you how to scaffold play, because I'm listening to IEP goals and they're always like, oh, can complete a 3-step play process. Okay, well, I'm a high school math teacher. I don't know. What does that mean? So I ask her and she tells me, well, this is what it means. Like 1 step, you can put the baby in the crib, right? The next 2-step play, then you're going to rock the baby. Then 3-step. Oh, well, okay. Can you train all of our teachers to even know what that means? Because then when you're watching kids and all they do is put that baby to bed and they don't know what else to do. Now you have the words to say to them, and have those words around your classroom so that when the dang administrator comes in and they see the questions they can ask to give them an opportunity to engage with your students, they know what they should ask. And then, you know, the kids will fill their head with everything that they're doing and how it all fits together. But yeah, some of that side-by-side coaching and explaining to a principal what they're actually seeing. Oh, well, do you see what they're doing? Well, here's what they're actually working on. That's super. I've done that with our superintendent and our assistant superintendent so that they can understand what they're seeing on the playground or why we have all these different pieces and how those support gross motor development, right? Or whatever. So yeah.
Can I say something to the first grade teacher real quick?
Sure, we are at time, so I'm just going to ask everybody to kind of put one takeaway in this chat while Michelle answers that. And there was one more question: how can we make play-based learning and explicit instruction coexist? So if you want to stick around and hear the answers to that, please feel free to do so and put one word in the chat, something you're going to take away from this, because this has been amazing, super practical, and local people telling you, you know, this is how we're doing it. So go ahead, Michelle.
So the first grade teachers, I talk to them a lot and they talk about writing. They need to write all the time. Kindergarten playtime is over. We need to learn to write, right? But high interest yields higher results and way more colorful language, right? So like starting a sentence out with like, you have to write this is not high interest. You're not going to get that colorful writing that way, right? So like, can there be a center in first grade that is for making party invitations, a letter to a friend, anything? Like kids love making cards for each other. Like use those, you know, instead of using your sight word wall, which shouldn't be on your wall, by the way, it should be eye level. If you have those words that they already know and you want them to use them, make them available for them to use when they are writing letters, when they're making invitations. Maybe they're gonna, you know, and arm yourself with research, you know, for your principal. If you really want to do this in first grade, show them the research about childhood development. Make yourself a secret literacy center where they're making cards no one's ever going to know, and besides, the results are going to be part of your results for your principal.
Thank you all so much. Any parting words from our panelists? Maybe just a word or a phrase that you want to give our participants before we end this awesome institute.
I would say just advocate, you know, advocate. You know, you are the advocate for your students and your families. And whenever I start to feel nervous that, you know, maybe an administrator or school board or a family in my classroom doesn't understand what I'm doing, I have to remember that I am doing what's best for children. That is my job first and foremost. And so I'll defend that to the end, and just so continue to advocate for what you know is good teaching, is best practice, and trust in yourself.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to just say too, because there's a couple questions that we didn't quite get to, and I just want to say that play is the right of each and every child, and so we need to remember that too. And yeah, each and every child has that right. It's not a privilege; it's a right.
And your state superintendent, Dr. Ayala, is behind play. If you have not heard her speak, she is very open about it.
All right, thank you all again. Thank you, panelists, for joining us, and thank you, participants, for making this a great Early Childhood Summer Institute.